Reclaiming Paradise Lost. Once upon a time, there was something of a life principle, call it God, call it Spirit, call it the Great Spirit, call it the Divine Infinite Intelligence, something that was nothing and yet everything. And it said, let me create. I'm getting bored. Just being myself with no company, nothing to appreciate around me other than my own wondrous self. And so a garden was prepared, filled with luscious fruits and vegetation and flowers and everything that personified the beauty of the nature of this certain something, this life principle. And then after a while, the divine God, the life principle itself, was bored again and said, but there's no one to reflect something that lives and thinks like I do. Let me create man in my spiritual image and likeness. And voila, the Garden of Eden, which had been prepared for them, and for the forms of life, the creatures of the land and the sea and the water, man was created. And then man became lonely, and this, of course, conveyed itself to the Creator. And so woman was created. Now, out of the rib of Adam, I don't think so. But figuratively speaking, it does represent the thinker who had been thinking life into creation, and now was the feminine counterpart, that which is love coming into form to appreciate and experience itself. And so we have the first man and woman who wandered the garden of paradise, of living without want or need or desire for anything, for it was all at their disposal. And they were naked. There was no shame. There was nothing to hide. There was just this great transparency that personified the infinite possibility and potential to really experience oneself as divine and yet savoring human material fruits and veggies and beauty all around. And so there was one caveat that God had placed upon Adam and Eve. And God had said, you can have anything, eat anything, but do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that was fine. There was more than everything around, and that satisfied all appetites of Adam and Eve. And so one day a serpent arises and is with Eve conversing just about life in general, and the serpent suggested, why don't you eat of this forbidden fruit? And Eve protested and said, no, I can't do that. That's the one thing that God has forbidden Adam and I to do. Oh, don't worry about it. It will be juicy and succulent and savory, and you will enjoy it to the last drop. And who knows? You're here, I'm here. Who's to know? And so she takes a bite, and Adam comes by and, of course, is shocked and appalled. What have you done? You have broken the commitment to God not to eat of this forbidden fruit, of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And she very brilliantly says, the serpent made me do it. I wouldn't have thought of that on my own, but it was through the power of his suggestion. Why don't you taste of it too? Come on, what's the big deal? This is all direct quote from the Bible. What's the big deal, particularly? And so Adam joins her in their infidelity to the divine promise, the covenant. And for this, God is pretty angry. And they are as well guilty. They're now hiding their private parts. And that which was open and transparent and free and liberating now becomes something that is of a different nature. And yet they're experiencing it. They're the ones who had paradise, who lived in the Garden of Eden and experienced heaven in their piece of the earth as they knew it in the garden. And yet now it was a different story. And so they were exiled from the Garden of Eden. And it's all metaphysical. If you really read what's happening in the Old Testament and the New Testament, it's all the soul evolution of all humanity, and it's our own growth and development. And so particularly Genesis, which is where the story of creation is told. And by the way, there are 2 versions in the Bible, so take your pick. And then a third one, if you go to your Science of Mind textbook, there's a segment that follows the first 4 pieces of how to think, the thing itself, etc., and it's called In the Beginning. And from that you have the theory that Holmes offers as his story of creation, which is quite beautiful. And so the metaphysical interpretation is, you have something, I have something, that we can look around, and particularly in nature, in the cosmos, we can see the beauty and the proliferation of life. And it's all around us, and that's why we're drawn to go to nature when there's a restlessness in our hearts, and there's a confusion in our minds, and as a result, our bodies aren't experiencing that top quality, maximum wholeness, which is the spiritual image and likeness of God. And so the representation of the whole creation is always, there has to be more. Somehow there's always a greater idea. First there was God, in the beginning the Word, and all that God had given to that Word as an energy, as a potential, was what the garden was without humanity, without the human form to inhabit it. And then God spoke another word, and that word did form what we now have been in the image and likeness of, which is the divine nature. Yes, we're still going through life, and yet the life that we're living can either taste of the forbidden fruit and go into the negativity and the fear and the isolation and the false sense of separation from source, or it can remain tethered to the truth and were offered as the continuation of the soul of humanity evolved through Moses, who gave the 10 Commandments. It was because at that time the people of the Hebrew nation were unruly. They were prone to either being victims or, in some occasions, victors. And yet there was confusion, and there was the human seduction of Solomon's words, the songs that he sung, all were proclaiming the glory of God, and yet something else was going on in the wars and the violence and in the Sodom and Gomorrah stories. And I think that's what's happening now, that we somehow are reliving that part of the Old Testament, where not only is there an adherence to spiritual law that's calling all of us to a higher level, as the poets would say, to that higher order of being, to knowing that if you and I were given a mind, and that was the purpose originally, the greatest discovery, was man can think, man can choose, man can select and judge and evaluate, man can love, man can hate, man can give of kindness and generosity, or man can be cruel and violent. And yet we all share the common denominator. The essence of goodness abides within each and every one of us. In a more contemporary fable, there's a story told, and yet it too happened many years ago, and it's that a portion of the likeness of God in the human form lived at a certain higher level. They looked almost as if they were on a balcony. And in that balcony, of course, was also the perfection and the substance of anything anyone could desire. And yet one day their attention was captured when they were called to look down from the balcony, and they realized there was another life going on. And it seemed to be more fun than theirs, that there was frolicking and there was dancing and there was music and there were many people not just the few that had the privilege, it seemed, to be overlooking that life from their balcony of higher consciousness, perhaps. And so they decided to make a pact that they would all just take a little fall from grace and go over the balcony and see what it felt like. And so they take the leap over the balcony, and there they are, out among us. We are it, they are us, and we are all one, and again, open to and privy to the seductions of broken laws and broken promises and broken lives. Talking of which, I'm going to interrupt this for a moment to invoke all of us in the power of prayer, because before I left, I just got a message on the minister's listserv that Dr. Edward Vion and his center in Santa Rosa are all under mandatory evacuation because of the fires in Sonoma County. And so right here and right now, I know that the safety, the governance, the guidance, and direction of that one life principle, call it God, call it Buddha nature, call it Abba, call it Allah, call it whatever it is, that certain something that precludes, transcends, and yet includes the life that God is living as me and as all. And I know for people everywhere that there is a calming, a quieting, a restored well-being of mind, body, and soul as life continues and in a safer, clearer, perfect version of itself by means of all, because all is the one revealing itself by means of restored well-being, and so it is. So the group that are now us are the ones that are continuing to experience the seeming duality and divisiveness of listening to the world tell us what's going on. And I thought, regardless of what your political persuasion is or your proclivity toward whatever you feel is right, all of that is still pointing fingers, and we still have missed the point, as did Eve when she blamed the serpent for taking that bite out of the forbidden fruit. And the point is, it's not anyone. It's not the leader of our nation. It's not politics. It's not what's going on in Syria or any other part of the world that we are showing our own violence and hatred toward. It's the reluctance and the resistance to getting to the cause of it all. The president, the political situation, every situation that's currently going on is not the cause, it's the effect of something that has been stirring and gestating and germinating in consciousness. And if anything, he's the liberator. He's the one that says, okay, you got me to show you what you're thinking. How do you like it? You want some more, or do you want to change? Because I'm sticking with what I know, just as we all stick with what we know. But what do we know? And what is it we're really being asked to know at a higher level of wisdom and intelligence and love? And I think the only way we do that is the minute we start removing labels. If we label someone wrong, bad, violent, unjust, unfair, inhuman, we're really limiting our capacity to understand anything more than that. We have shut the door on ever leaning into, tell me more about why do you think what you think? I'm reading a book of a nature I have never read before, and it's called Become America. And it's by, anybody ever know? Good, then I can tell you anything I want about it, and you won't know the difference. I think his name, the author, is Edward Liu, L-I-U, and he was a political advisor to Clinton, and he's been in the political arena. And what he and his wife decided many years ago, they lived in Seattle, was to bring spiritual principles, but to bring them in as civil sermons geared toward showing people, you think you're a citizen of a free nation, and let me tell you, you've taken it for granted, and you've let it become what it's now becoming. So what are you going to do about it? And he talks about the three principles of love, responsibility, and being a citizen, and how that all moves in. And what they do, they started in the basement of a bookstore in Seattle, which is where they live. This was back maybe 10 years ago, or maybe even a little less. And they only had room for 40 people, and 250 people showed up, showing a desire and showing their willingness to be ignorant of American politics and American history. And if this is a direction I never thought I'd go in, it's very, very much a part of what I think is important. He has a section in the book where he just gives 3 questions that a immigrant is asked to answer before becoming approved as a U.S. citizen. Well, let me tell you something, I couldn't answer them. And go check the book, or what even that may just be an isolated item on Google. What are 3 sample questions from that question on the naturalization process? And so it showed me how little I know, and that's what the important thing is. We are always caused to our own experience. And although we look as if we're operating in a totally different lifestyle and manner and in a different place than what's happening in Washington or Syria or in Afghanistan or any part of the world, we are the world. God, that would make a great song. I could see the whole world singing it together. Oh my God. Bill, do something. Get your ear back to that speaker. So here we are. We've got the best of everything, because if spirit is the all-inclusive, all essence, all substance of idea of all that is possible, then politics is spirit, and economics is spirit, and the stock market is spirit, and you are spirit, and I am spirit, and the life you're living, where you're living, is spirit. And yet what is that life asking of you and asking of me to do that has to be transcendent to what we're presently doing, because otherwise what's happening in the world still would not be happening. So in the Garden of Eden and in Reclaiming Paradise Lost, the story is now about all of us down here that fell off the balcony, that fell out of grace, that ate the forbidden fruit, that went where we knew we shouldn't have gone, and did what we knew we shouldn't have done, and made decisions we knew that were not wise or helpful or healing to ourselves or anyone else. We're now struggling to get back on the balcony. That's the paradise lost, that higher consciousness of utilizing, somebody described it as the unified, infinite, spiritually inventive mind of God. And I love that. I am the spiritually inventive mind of God. Let's say that. I am the spiritually inventive mind of God. And I think with that mind with love and compassion. And I think with that mind with love and compassion. Come on, all you on live stream, say that with us. So the call is been sounded for many, many decades. And yet here we are. So I guess it's we who are being called to put our ear to that speaker. And it speaks very softly, and you have to stay with it very long, and you have to give it your undivided attention. It can't be, oh, I'm meditating now, and you hear that little click on your smartphone. Oh, wait, I'll just find out who this is, and I'll get right back to meditation. And so we continue feeling very holier than thou with our meditation. Looking at the watch a little bit. Is it over yet? Is it time to cut to the chase? Oh, the smell of that coffee. Oh my God, it's just arousing me in wonderful ways. Oh, I better not go there. Back to meditation. And so what have we got to take into life with us? The same distraction that we started with when we sat to meditate. Because what you and I are doing that forms a persistent, consistent pattern, a repetitive way that you are in your life and I am in my life. That's the way we do everything, and that's what we're pouring out into life. because however you describe it, there is a certain silent something which is listening, and it doesn't only take us at our word, because we all speak loftily and we all have a cumulative knowledge that could wow anyone, but it's the feeling, it's the essence, it's the emotion, it's the motivation, and it really is what stands behind what I'm telling you. It's what I'm not saying, that we're all asked to look at and to become informed, servants of the divine, by being helpful and healing to everyone around us. That's our call, that's why we're here, and that's why our human battle within ourselves between the apple and the balcony and staying in that garden while being out among them, and yet finding a way to be among us all in a way that does help and heal, uplift and prosper. And we have, as I've said so often, the power of prayer, very handily called spiritual mind treatment, but it's simply treating. Must be the serpent. It's a combination of creeping and sleeping. Who knows? And so, yeah, let's wake up. We've all been asleep. And when we wake up for those 3 minutes a day or something, we think, oh boy, have I done a hell of a job. No. Get up, stay up, keep up, stand up, think up, feel up, and give the world what the world needs now. You, me, all of us, as informed citizens of a universal planet that speaks a universal language of unity, of love, of harmony, of oneness, of taking responsibility for thinking and feeling and being the best that we can be. The very small quote that was on this week's Conscious Contact update had simply, I think and I speak and I feel and I act, and that's how I go out into the world, and that's my paradise. I've just entered into it. It said it probably in half those number of words. So that's what I know, and I know that you know that I know that you know, because we are, as Ernest Holmes said, we are it. We are the thing itself, and so it is.